Hi, BookTube, and welcome to another fiction review. What is home? Now, the simple answer would just be to say that home is a place. But I think everyone watching here knows that it's not that simple. And the protagonist of the book that we're going to look at today, if she were asked, she might say that home is a state of mind and that life is a search for that place where the mind finally feels at ease, feels settled without feeling caged. And that place earns the right to be called home. What we don't know is whether she ever found that place herself. She once said, "Home is where you feel at home. I'm still looking." Today, we are reviewing Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote, published in 1958 by Hamish Hamilton. Let's pitch this book. This is a novella, a mere 100 pages long, and it's narrated by a man who plays an active role in all the story events, but he's never named, or more precisely, he's never given his real name. The story also begins after its ending. What the narrator relates to us are events which happened years before, when he was younger. From then on, it makes a kind of sense that he has no name, because the novella is not about him, but about the young woman who lived in the same apartment building one floor below. And the 1961 film, starring Audrey Hepburn, ensured that we all recognize this woman, Holiday Golightly, or Holly for short. This woman is what the story is about. In her own words, Holly Golightly is a wild thing. She wants to be wealthy, but only independently so. In 1958, when the book was written, there were far fewer ways for a woman to have both money and freedom. Holly has become what was known at the time as a playgirl. She capitalizes on her youth and her beauty. She wears beautiful clothes to New York night spots in the hope of capturing the attention of wealthy men. Now, the career trajectory of a playgirl is supposed to ideally end in a fiscally advantageous marriage. And Holly is never wanting for a man who wants her. I am not going to say more. If you have only seen the film, you don't know this story, because Hollywood was not going to run with that. But before we go on to talk about the book itself, let's have a look at its commercial and physical aspects, so to speak. My copy was the paperback Penguin Essentials reprints, and I'm not sure exactly how old it is. Penguin started these reprints in 1961, but the price on the back cover of mine is £5.99, and that is definitely too expensive for the 1960s. The inside cover lists the other published works by Truman Capote, and the latest one listed came out in 1986. I reckon this is a late 1980s print run. I bought this at the Oxfam shop in Stratford-on-Avon. I think I paid £2. On that same day, in an unknowing tribute to Breakfast at Tiffany's, I also had lunch at a cat cafe. I've always wanted to do that. Now, I spent most of my time defending my food and the little jug of milk that I was given for my tea, but I enjoyed every minute. This is the section where we talk about the author, and once again, we've got one of those big literary lives that deserves better than the skimpy little biographies that you get in my reviews. I'm going to recommend a couple of longer biographical works later on. What I want to emphasize in this section is Truman's ability to invent himself. He understood how fame worked, and he knew how to work it, at least for a while. Holiday Golightly, I think, is a Truman Capote understudy. Just like her, Truman changed his birth name. He was born Truman Streckfus Persons. Yeah. After he moved to New York, however, and moved in with his mother and her second husband, Jose Garcia Capote, he saw some better options. Truman Capote attended Greenwich School in Connecticut between 1939 and 1941, and he wrote for the school's literary journal, The Green Witch. You can still find back issues of The Green Witch, containing Capote stories. I think they're on sale for between $1,500 and $2,000 US, if you're interested. He did not go on to higher education. Capote is quoted as saying, "I was determined never to set a studious foot inside a college classroom. I felt that either one was or wasn't a writer, and no combination of professors could influence the outcome." I think that was correct, at least in my case. Between 1943 and 1946, Capote proved his point. He got short fiction published in both popular and literary periodicals such as Harper's Bazaar, The Atlantic Monthly, Mademoiselle, and The New Yorker. At the age of 24, in 1948, his short story, Shut a Final Door, won the O. Henry Award, and his first novel, which came out in 1947, Other Voices, Other Rooms, made it onto the New York Times bestseller list. But it was the cover photo, which you see right here, had an even greater impact than the text itself. In the words of a journalist from the Los Angeles Times, Capote looked, quote, as if he were dreamily contemplating some outrage against conventional morality. After Breakfast at Tiffany's, Capote's last and best-known work is In Cold Blood, a story which made stronger claims about its basis in fact than proved to be true, but it was a provocative crime narrative. The remainder of Capote's life seems to me to have a lot of the holly-go-lightly quality to it. That is, there was lots of being seen in the right places with the right people, lots of going here and there, but not achieving anything, not grounding himself. Truman Capote died in 1984, aged just 59. The setting for Breakfast at Tiffany's. The novella is set in New York. What's interesting is it's mainly behind closed doors. The Greenwich apartment where Holly and the narrator live, Joe's bar on Lexington Avenue, many other night spots, the city library, a bus depot, a police station, a hospital room, the inside of a taxi. And this predominating business of being closed in is so curious because Holly Golightly is passionately opposed to any kind of captivity. The occasions where she and the narrator go outside and take in the city sights are often occasions when Holly makes this point. I'll give an example. On page 52, the narrator says, "We ate lunch at the cafeteria in the park. Afterwards, avoiding the zoo, Holly said she couldn't bear to see anything in a cage. We giggled, ran, sang along the paths toward the old wooden boathouse. Holly buys the narrator an antique bird cage as a Christmas present, but makes him vow never to put a living creature inside of it." The settings are therefore ironic. They emphasize how constrained Holly's uncaged life really is. Capote uses the apartment building fire escape to good effect. Holly uses it to flee one of her many gentleman callers, but it's only providing her with a brief respite, not the real escape that she desires. When, at the end of the novella, she makes a bigger break for freedom, and I won't say more, the narrator has an easier time assuring the reader that Holly's pet cat has now found its forever home. Regarding the narration, the narrator, which we know is now this unnamed man, speaks in the first person, and he begins his story at a point many years after Holly Golightly has gone, and then he rewinds back to the time they first met and recounts their brief spell as neighbors. I was impressed by Capote's sharply observed characterizations. None of that overused descriptive inventory. I think you know what I mean. The sort of thing that could double as a police interview statement by a witness trying to describe the suspect. State eye color, state hair color, state height, describe two pieces of clothing, that kind of thing. Capote's descriptions are lateral and fresh. They don't describe the obvious, and the result is like a word caricature that can really be seen. I could read a number of different examples, but to demonstrate how effective Capote's ability is, I'm going to read the narrator's first glimpse of Holly Golightly from page 17. "I went out into the hall and leaned over the banister, just enough to see without being seen. She was still on the stairs. Now she reached the landing, and the rag-bag colors of her boy's hair, tawny streaks, strands of albino blonde and yellow, caught the hall light. It was a warm evening, nearly summer, and she wore a slim, cool black dress, black sandals, a pearl choker. For all her chic thinness, she had an almost breakfast cereal air of health, a soap and lemon cleanness, a rough pink darkening in the cheeks. Her mouth was large, her nose upturned. A pair of dark glasses blotted out her eyes. It was a face beyond childhood, yet this side of belonging to a woman. I thought her anywhere between 16 and 30. As it turned out, she was shy 2 months of her 19th birthday. Audrey Hepburn seems to fit this description well, and what that says to me is that Capote's words were enough for the casting director to have a clear image in his mind when he was looking around for the right fit. His idea differed with the authors, by the way. Capote really wanted Marilyn Monroe in that role. I've seen articles which argue whether Breakfast at Tiffany's would have been a better film if Marilyn had been cast, but for what my opinion is worth, and it's not worth much when it comes to film, Breakfast at Tiffany's I think would have been better if the script had been brave enough to stay true to the novella. What was censored out or altered would have made it a better film. Does this novel fit a genre label? Well, if you have only seen the film, beware. This is not a love story, not a romance. Our anonymous narrator is clear on that. This is what he says on page 71. Was my outrage a little the result of being in love with Holly myself? A little, for I was in love with her, just as I'd once been in love with my mother's elderly colored cook, and a postman who let me follow him on his rounds, and an entire family named McKendrick. That category of love generates jealousy too. This book is not about love. It is about identity, which is why names are sometimes lacking in the narrator, in Holly's cat, or in Holly's case, she's renamed herself. Holly and her narrator and her cat are all the same species. They do not belong, but they want to, as Holly puts it, be on the inside staring out. It is possible that the narrator will achieve this belonging status. He has ambitions to become a writer, and that's going to make him a name. But the story cuts off before we know for sure whether anybody except the cat, the lucky cat, gets a home and a name. I would say the novella is a kind of romantic quest, a search for the 20th century definition of transcendence, which is becoming somebody, becoming rich and famous. What makes this book magnificent for me is that it manages to convey a strong moral lesson that this kind of quest is false, without so much as a hint of didacticism. And in my opinion, just my opinion again, I feel that this is becoming a lost art in current fiction and in drama. Or maybe it's more accurate to say that writing seems to place less trust in the reader nowadays to reach the right conclusion by themselves, without the need for narrators or characters to interrupt the story flow and sermonize. And on that same sort of subject area, it's a pity to me that in 1961, America was not culturally ready for the queerness that is in Breakfast at Tiffany's. The film erases all indications of same-sex attraction, all Holly's mentions of lesbianism, for example. And Holly's upstairs neighbor on screen, who does have a name, who's called Paul Varjak, is a straight man. But the book's narrator? Well, you've already heard him describe the way he's in love with Holly. It might be helpful to compare that with his first impressions of a male character, Jose Ybarra Yeager. I'm going to read now from page 46. Over the weekend, mystery deepened. First, there was the Latin who came to my door mistakenly, for he was inquiring after Miss Wildwood. It took a while to correct his error. Our accents seemed mutually incoherent, but by the time we had, I was charmed. He'd been put together with care. His brown head and bullfighter's figure had an exactness, a perfection, like an apple, an orange, something nature has made just right. Added to this as decoration were an English suit and a brisk cologne, and what is still more un-Latin, a bashful manner. The second event of the day involved him again. It was toward evening, and I saw him on my way out to dinner. He was arriving in a taxi. The driver helped him totter into the house with a load of suitcases. That gave me something to chew on. By Sunday, my jaws were quite tired. Is there problematic content in this book? It's a funny thing. If I were filming this review in 1958, I'd have to give you a completely different list of problematic content warnings. The novella was supposed to make its first appearance in Harper's Bazaar before it came out as a book. But the Hearst Corporation, which owned the magazine, they were worried that Tiffany's, who spent a lot on page advertising, wouldn't consider the story to be good publicity. The profanity used in the book is tame by current standards, but it would have been completely unacceptable in the 1960s, along with a lot of the quite obvious allusions to sexual behavior. A number of places banned the film in 1961 for reasons of language and sexual morality. What people did not have a problem with in the film was Mickey Rooney's performance as Mr. Yunioshi. My friend Georgie kindly loaned me the film on DVD this week, and it was Rooney's screen time that I really wished I could edit out. I gather there is a 2022 version of the film where all Mr. Yunioshi's parts have been cut out. I don't know how they've managed to do that. In the novella, Mr. Yunioshi is not a racist stereotype, you'll be pleased to know. However, if you're going to read the book, you have to be prepared to hear characters use a lot of racist language, which was just, it was typical of late 1950s America. Also, be aware that in this book there are character situations which involve a relationship between an adult and a minor, and also the loss of an unborn child. Finally, any suggestions for related or follow-up reading? Yeah, I got a couple. The first, naturally, I think expectantly, obviously, has to be a more detailed biography of Truman Capote. And the one that kept coming up whenever I searched was the work by Gerald Clark, published in 2013. But I also found a book for all fans of the film, and that is Fifth Avenue, 5 a.m. by Sam Wesson, which is the complete account of the making of Breakfast in Tiffany's, but gets you set with a lot of context about America at the time. And that is another book review done. There isn't much of August left, is there? Yesterday, I had to do some catch-up reading to keep up with the schedule, the timetable for Faulkner in August. I did it, but I am also on schedule to complete 5 books this month and 45 of the 53 books that I have to read to achieve the goal that I set myself in my Read What I Own challenge. Now, if you've struggled to read as much as you'd like to this month because of the heat or school holidays or who knows what, please have compassion on your hot, weary self, and I will be back with another video middle of the week. Okay, take care, BookTube. Bye-bye.